All right, so already in studio with us, we have Stella Mumbi, who is the GM Tala, and we'll be talking about credit in this country and how it can be utilized, especially at such a time and such a season. But starting us off is Matters Climate and Africa Climate Business Forum, where experts now say that Africa will require $190 billion every year from now until 2030 for mitigation against climate change. And according to the International Monetary Fund, another $50 billion a year from 2030 to 2050 for climate adaptation. However, according to experts, the continent will require more investment in areas of decarbonization if climate change mitigation is to bear fruit. Jimmy Mbogo was following the conversation at the Africa Climate Business Summit and now joins us with more. Good afternoon, Jimmy.
Well, thank you very much, Noah, and a very good afternoon to you. Yes, as you rightfully said, we are currently having a conversation around climate financing and just looking at some of the 4 key areas, and particularly the role of businesses. We're talking about decarbonizing growth in Africa, looking at building carbon markets across the continent, and also things to do with green urbanization, as well as climate-smart agriculture and scaling finance and capital market. That is some of the conversation that is happening at Africa Climate Business Forum that is currently happening here for today and tomorrow. And I just want to get the guys behind this summit. Of course, it's a partnership between IFC as well as the Central Bank. And now I'm joined by Mary Potter, who's the IFC Regional Director for East Africa. Mary, thank you so much for making time to speak to KTN. So I just want to get your sentiments in terms of when you look at the East African market, when you look at the East Africa region, one of the things that we want you to help us understand is what are some of the significant opportunities that the region then has in terms of transitioning to a low carbon ecosystem?
So thanks for that question. I think there's huge opportunity in Africa writ large, as well as here in Eastern Africa. If you think about the fact that the continent hosts a preponderance of renewable energy. The estimate is some 40% of the world. Here in Kenya, it's well over 90% of your power is powered by renewable energy. You also have human resources. They're huge, they're growing, they're creative. They're going to bring the innovation for the solutions, including technical ones, that we're going to need going forward.
So how then do we strike that balance between growth, that is economic growth, as well as reducing our carbon footprint?
So I think the key is to think about green development. You know, we must consider climate as we go forward. And one thing we're doing at our institution, the International Finance Corporation, is we're examining our projects as we process them to identify risks with our clients and figure out how we either help them adapt or mitigate to them. That's going to be really critical in all the private sector projects that we and other players do. How do we leverage on some of the financial mechanism to be able to ensure that decarbonization efforts in Africa then get to bear fruits? Look, I think there's a wide variety of things that the different players can do. At IFC, we're working with the private sector and with governments to green cement, to green building, to support clients implementing climate-smart agriculture, green urban transport. We know emissions come from cities, and the cities in Africa are getting bigger and bigger. Every day we're trying to use bonds. We announced a green bond for Tanzania recently, and we have another one coming in the next day or two. So green bonds, sustainability bonds, other sustainability-linked instruments. And then I think we have to open our minds to the idea that sometimes great ideas from an impact perspective are not going to be financially viable, but they're going to be worth doing because of the positive climate impact they have.
And of course, I just want to bring Jamie into this conversation. How do we rope in the private sector to invest in some, and particularly the businesses, to invest and ensure that they, first of all, eradicate and reduce their carbon footprint, even as they do sustainable businesses?
Thanks for joining us today at the Africa Climate Business Forum. So I've just come in from Abu Dhabi in the pre-COP negotiations. COP begins in a month's time, just under a month's time. And at the COP, we're going to find out from the UNFCCC and their global stocktake that to meet the Paris goals, we have to reduce carbon emissions by 43% by 2030. That's a complete rewiring of the global economy. It's change on the scale of the Industrial Revolution at the speed of the digital revolution. So all private sector actors need to be preparing and adjusting for that, preparing to reduce their emissions, decarbonizing what they're doing, changing their energy sources, reducing their carbon process emissions.
Even as we talk about carbon markets, what has been the biggest concern, and particularly in terms of just coming up with a reliable carbon pricing mechanism?
Yeah, thank you. And it's a real challenge. So ultimately, number one, we need to remove all of the subsidies going to fossil fuels, which are every country in the world continues to subsidize fossil fuels, which is the opposite of what we need to do. Then we need to add a price on carbon, and that's the subject of the negotiations at COP for all countries to do that. And then we need to unlock massive investment in renewable energy, and Kenya's a wonderful story of that, with its strong reliance on wind, on geothermal, and we need that across the African continent. But until we get that regulatory push, it's very hard for the private sector to act with the scale and urgency needed. That said, technology innovation is really helping us. IFC's supported a lot of technologies down the cost curve. We were the first investors in many countries in wind, in solar, and we've seen an incredible evolution of the price of those renewable energy technologies so that they are now the lowest cost solution in many, many countries.
Mary, thank you so much for making time to speak to us. And of course, Don, the big conversation, this is just setting the stage for, just setting the stage for climate action in Africa. The conversation is currently going on, and we'll be here just to make sure that we can be able to.
Thank you very much, Jimmy. I know from Marta's climate